One of the unique things about being in Europe, we have an above average number of sovereign nations in a smaller space than much of the world. It's just one of the ways we've organised ourselves here, where elsewhere a large number of diverse territories might be grouped under one nationality. Think Indonesia or India, say, or the polar regions where populations can be so sparse that nations thousands of miles across emerge, like Canada or Russia. It's not that there aren't small sovereign nations elsewhere in the world, but in Europe we have a uniquely high quantity of microstates, small or comparatively small nations in one continent. And this offers people with resources the opportunity to pull off some unique travelling salesman speed runs. So there were these guys doing a 24-hour run in 2014, mostly driving through with a sneaky flight here, or the 2022 attempt, though for my 2 cents, flying kind of feels like cheating, as it's just waiting for someone to pay to win. If you have access to something approximating an attack helicopter and the leverage to secure landings at helipads or airfields in pretty much all European nations, you could have yourself a pretty not fun 24 hours just dropping into each just to say you ticked them off the list, sponsored by, I don't know, probably your rich dad. So yeah, that would seem like quite a hollow achievement. Anything we've done that's vaguely like this, like our Flixbus rampage from Prague to Ljubljana, we actually did see things in all these countries. But okay, putting aside record attempts and bragging rights, just the ability to move across sovereign borders multiple times a day can't help but feel novel for a Brit. I mean, much as I love Wales and can zigzag across the border multiple times pretty much just by travelling on a straight-ish heading, it just doesn't feel the same. It doesn't have the frisson of international law behind it. And having covered the length of Switzerland west to east, we'd just arrived at Lake Konstanz and we were staying on the eastern shore, which is in Germany. And we have to do a title drop somewhere, so we are Forest Archaic Collective, and as well as making jungle drum and bass, we've followed ancient sites across Europe and beyond, whether it's Neolithic standing stones, Roman arches, or Romanesque churches. If it's ancient, we're into it. Now, a bit of context. It was very hot when we arrived on the evening of day 3. It had been a lot of driving that day, so we slumped down in the apartment, rather exhausted. There was a quite delightful cat that had taken up residence on the porch chairs, who appeared to appreciate the attention. The host had been growing their own chilies, which were pretty great. Not loads to say about dinner, so I won't dwell on it. Found a nice spot in Uldingen Mühlhofen, a short way away from the apartment. The following morning, not much to report other than a quick pastry run. The reason we were staying here, and I can just hardly express how excited about this I was, having been up to this for a while, hunting ancient sites across Europe and beyond, there are some places I've been eyeing for 5, 6, even 7 years, particularly places that are a bit out of the way or where it's not instantly obvious how I would easily get there under my own steam. And scarcely able to contain myself, I was vibrating excitedly outside the gate before doors open, and trying not to burst through the doors in a socially unacceptable manner, I scuttled towards the outside area to be greeted with the Pfahlbauten unter Uldingen, or auf English, the Pile Dwelling Museum. There is an incredible disconnect between how awesome these places actually are compared to just the title of Pile Dwelling. We already got excited about a place last week and we'll continue to get excited about one next week and a little after that too, but this place provides a remarkable insight into a culture living 3, 4, even 5,000 years ago. If you're not caught up, these are common to the region all around the Alps. There are actually different types of sites represented here. This schematic is helpful, so this is excavated from Unter Uldingen, around here, from sort of 900 BC. These are from Bad Buchau, around 1050. These are from Riedschachen, around 4000 BC. This palisaded segment from around Sippelingen, no, I don't know where all these places are either, about 3500 BC, and a couple of other Neolithic houses from 3900 and 3400 BC, respectively. As is inherent with any recreated archaeology, a lot has to be inferred. There's a wealth of finds from here and much that can be gleaned from the archaeology, but that's the exciting thing, that in physically building it, testing out the materials, seeing what, sounds good on paper but won't survive contact with reality, or having to build it and make it last, that's the really exciting thing here. And to not leave it simply implied, so much more evocative than simply a reconstruction drawing. To actually be able to walk around it, to photograph it, to place hands on it, We now believe that rather than actually projecting over and onto the water, the dwellings would have likely been on the shoreline, sort of over marshy wetland as opposed to directly over the lake. Still, this is a small consideration considering they are undoubtedly amphibious in character. They are adapting over places where walking becomes difficult, let's say that. So, just unbelievable. And to have this on a gorgeous blue sky morning, just too perfect. So this was all just fantastically exciting for me, and the rest of the party were pretty enthusiastic too. Even for the visitor with no enthusiasm for history, this place is enchanting. So it had the vibes of someone having ticked off a bucket list item. We are still in the process of ticking things off all over Europe. At time of writing, just very recently, the last week in fact, I've been eyeing the southern coast of Ireland for the longest time. It's those jagged bits that project into the Atlantic, and not only is the landscape fantastically melodramatic, but there's a whole ton of ancient sites there. Where tracing hill forts in England invariably looks like this, in Ireland, their Iron Age was never disrupted by the Roman presence, so theirs evolved into these ring forts, which are just too exciting to witness. So we have a whole series on hill forts pending a second season, so definitely check that out. Or coming very shortly, we're going to be covering a massive trip across Albania, but also with sections in both Montenegro and North Macedonia. That was incredibly exciting, and not long ago we were back in Italy taking in the unbelievable Lake Como, as well as some of the more ancient Lombard traces around Pavia. So there is a huge amount not just coming up on the channel, but already for you to see. The Italy playlist is a good place to start, with a huge amount around ancient Rome and Sicily and beyond. Also, our Greek playlist keeps expanding with much more yet to come. So yeah, have a dig into the playlist tab for more, and just a subscribe and hitting the bell would make all the difference. And despite the fact that what we're doing is only ramping up and up, this platform seems to barely have any appetite to put our stuff in front of the 5,000 people who've shown some interest in what we do, rather just dribble it out to about 200 and then bury it, never to emerge again. So definitely hit the bell to actually have a chance of seeing what we're doing. Anyway, as mentioned in the thumbnail, we have other things to attend to, like some borders to cross, and for I think everyone in the group, including myself, this was going to be some firsts. So heading away from Unteruldingen, the drive south felt long. It's just about an hour from where we're staying to the border, though there's quite a bit of traffic slowing things. There's a lot of green to enjoy, some fleeting views of the lake, but despite tracing the eastern bank, not as many as you might have expected. I was chowing down on the usual food I end up eating when in much of Europe. It's cured meats and the crinkle cut crisps. Yeah, a little high on the sodium content, but it pairs well with a celebratory midday beer. The Austrian border is a bit underwhelming, which good. Like, this is the delightful thing about Schengen borders, avoiding the queues, the passport checks, which seem at best a bit of a formality. As I'm recording this, there's much talk of EES rollout, particularly as it pertains to British nationals. These were the terminals at Malpensa recently. Suffice to say, we did not struggle to make our flight, though don't take my word for it, your experience may vary. But yes, it feels like a unique pleasure to be able to glide across borders and it mean mostly nothing. So we are now in Austria for the first time, never been before. Lake Konstanz itself is actually cleaved in three between Switzerland, Germany and Austria, leading to some legal fiddles which we're not going to litigate here. Saw a blimp too, and there's something about the parallax which gives it the strange impression that it's sort of crashing to the ground, though thankfully, of course, it wasn't. So we pulled up in Bregenz. This is the extreme western end of Austria, around 600 kilometers from Vienna and the Danube in the east, but of course, Austria nonetheless. It took us a while to find a parking space, and then only just barely managed one from which we could actually exit our vehicle. Well, enjoyed walking the streets. As you can see, it was boiling hot. It would feel idiotic to set foot in Austria for 20 minutes and suddenly just have all the opinions. That's kind of the thing. It's not some huge cold water shock from Germany or the other towns on the eastern bank of Konstanz. I mean, why would it be? The streets were pretty and clean and historic looking without being spectacularly ancient. One thing that did feel mandatory to see, up a not inconsiderable hill, and this is the Deuringsschloss, sort of a castle and old town. Definitely a nice aspect from the opposite side of the valley to the west. Very pretty, not entirely our period of interest historically, so got some pics, followed the paths through, appreciating the shade where we got it. So passing through the gate and back into the more modern town, felt appropriate to stop for an affogato at an indie coffee spot, which was very nice. And then, so as not to pay too much for parking, we were heading out of the town and south. Now, this is a line of towns across the Austrian western border. I'd forgotten about this. There was a bit of anxiety on the day. Austria has this toll system where you need something called a vignette. Switzerland has similar, but while the car rental guys hadn't mentioned this at all, going back through our rental agreement, it appears that had been taken care of in Switzerland, but we had no such confidence in Austria. So we kept the more minor, somewhat slower routes just to avoid an expensive fine, eventually arriving in Feldkirch. This is going to sound just impossibly silly to my UK audience. I don't know, maybe for others this sounds entirely normal. Okay, in the UK, if you're right in a city centre, parking is at a premium, sure, but as you filter out to the suburbs, it's just park where there's some space. You're not in front of someone's drive, and out in the countryside, don't block any roads, but it's pretty simple. Now, we're in this Austrian neighbourhood, and no matter where you go, there's just nowhere you can pull up. Everything, everywhere, despite being a pretty small town community, has verboten signs and restrictions like you're in downtown New York. There's nowhere on the rather narrow residential roads. It's mostly that they don't really do curbs here. So yeah, it sounds ludicrous, but you just cannot find a legit parking space anywhere without blocking the entire road or just like ditching it in someone's private space. So this took much longer than it should have. In the end, we found some space outside of a school that was not in term time. Oh, and it gets kind of sillier. So our rental contract lists off the European countries you may drive in quite meticulously, including some microstates, though not others. And look, try as we might, we could not find a contract that would incorporate Switzerland, Germany, Austria, and Liechtenstein, the microstate tucked between Switzerland and Austria. It is partially administered by Switzerland, but it's a fully sovereign nation, and we didn't feel like very expensively voiding our rental contract, despite the border being a normal Schengen contactless affair. So the path of least resistance, having finally located a place to put the car, we caught a bus in. Maybe it wouldn't have resulted in massive levies from our car hire, but the fines, charges and penalties are where these companies really make their money. They are nothing if not willing you to make minor mistakes so they can charge thousands to your credit card and tie you up in a legal labyrinth until you just submit and give up. So, into Liechtenstein. There's a small sign for 1 second and a hurried low-angle flag shot on our way, and not exactly my best work. Did I not catch a low-angle Austrian flag shot? Yeah, that's not great, my bad. Oh, okay, I sort of caught one at the lake the following day. That will have to do, I guess. Not much wind. Well, okay, from the bus, Liechtenstein was pretty low-key, but certainly very pretty, particularly on this rather hot day. We stopped off in Eschen, which was very nice, if a little small and quiet. Would it shock you to your core if there was an ancient site here? Well, wouldn't you know? Right next to the Church of St. Martin, the footprint of its precursor church can be seen. It's an apsidal structure dating back to the 800s. Like we'd mentioned in some of the Roman sites in Switzerland, it appears to have been tidied up. So the footprint, remade with modern masonry techniques, though it's unclear how much, it kind of becomes more of a public monument than archaeology, strictly speaking. It sits on what was a Carolingian church listed in a source from about 842, though, yeah, once again, we're not entirely sure of this original footprint. Still, as an ancient fragment of the territory now named Liechtenstein, this was a good start. I had also penciled in a couple of castles that we could have walked to, or perhaps sought buses. Oberberg looks interesting, and the Schloss at Vaduz looks very nice. However, at this point, it was later in the afternoon, so it didn't feel like we could be too ambitious. So we took a drink by the square and started walking. There was a lot that felt very Swiss, from the houses to the trademark incredibly well-maintained infrastructure, which meant walking was a breeze despite it being next to a main road, and particularly rewarding, the views of the mountains to our east were a constant presence and very pleasing just to take in. So a few residential roads and the Villa Rustica. Again, due to the very sturdy and neat footprints here, I am calling reconstruction. But it definitely gives a good impression of the site, rather than just having it under turf with an image on an info board. It traces both a bathhouse here, that's the apse there, and some of the main villa buildings, though it was rebuilt several times until around the 300s AD. Yeah, so to catch a Roman site, that's definitely worth the price of admission. And while brief that was Liechtenstein, there's another low-angle flag shot, though not in the correct ratio. It had ended up being a lot longer getting there than I'd anticipated, so rather than an afternoon to take it in, we were only there for a little over 2 hours, hence you're not seeing a standalone Liechtenstein episode. I hadn't been sure going in how remote Liechtenstein was going to be or how easily we could get around. As it turned out, much like Germany and elsewhere, the ubiquity of cycle paths next to all the main roads meant we could have quite readily just walked in and around, and that was great. But being able to visit an entire nation, especially one as curious and, as it turns out, beautiful as Liechtenstein, was too good an opportunity to pass up. So back across the border on a bus. With that, the boys had taken interest in a Chinese restaurant just over the Austrian side. Mine was a bit, not too special, but it was definitely good to be having a solid meal, and one for only 12 odd euros, so great. We drove back and were greeted with ever-deepening shades of fire on the horizon as we crossed back into Germany and made up the distance. So that turned out to be a lot for one day, but everyone seemed happy. And hey, it's not every day you visit 3 countries in a single day. We've got a lot more to catch as we retrace our steps across Switzerland, as well as a little more from around Konstanz, but to keep it concise-ish, I'm going to park it there for this week. Just a quick one, results from last week's game. We were seeing if folks could identify places just from the aerial footage. The first one was Koroni. We mentioned that in our Obscure Parts of Greece episode. And then as our flight headed up the Adriatic, this was Durs in Albania. We'll be there pretty soon, so keep eyes out for those episodes. Then the Elefiti Isles, that's Kolocep, Lopud and Shipan, noteworthy for being possessions of the Republic of Ragusa. Got a couple of episodes on that are worth a look. And finally, the Pelješac Bridge. I've not actually experienced this in person yet. This was a huge and somewhat controversial project which allows you to avoid the 2 border crossings in and out of the Bosnian town of Neum in quick succession. When I passed this way last, it was still under construction. I've been missing Croatia. It's been too long since I was last there. So I'm a bit on the clock getting this week's out in time, so I will leave the next round for the end of next episode, where we're covering the rest of Switzerland as well as more from around Konstanz. If you've enjoyed the music in the background of this episode, it's ours. We make all the music for these episodes, and you can catch it on bandcamp.com. If you want to support the channel, that's the place to do it. Also, we are working to a bit of a backlog. This is in fact from summer 2024. So yeah, if you want to see what we're doing on more of a week-by-week basis, check us out on Blue Sky. You can see a lot more of what's happening there. And yes, please hit the subscribe and especially hit the bell so you get your notifications to see what we're doing, and we'll catch you very soon.